Alright adventurers, sometimes when we're playing our games, things can happen which then escalate a little bit more than what we think, and it ends up with us asking ourselves the question, am I the asshole? And sometimes people take these queries to Reddit. So we'll be going through one of those questions today in this video, so let's get into this. Yes, it is I, Nathaniel Gomezian, shopkeeper and proprietor of Gaming Treasure Chest, and as I said, in today's video, we're going to be diving into Reddit and a Am I the Arsehole question. This is a bit of a different video than what I would normally do. I'd love to hear what you think about it, but as I go through this one, I want to be trying to see it from the different perspectives of the person writing the post and obviously the people who it's affected, so whenever I go through anything like this, I will try and see it from all different angles, because I think it's interesting to see what we can learn from situations like this in terms of to make sure that it doesn't happen to us in the future, or what we can do in the future if something like this happens at our table. So anyway, let's get into the post. So Reedy reads.
So Oakleaf Daneko asks, am I the asshole for killing off a player character even though I could have chosen not to? I'm somewhat of a new DM and I'm running a very homebrew campaign. I really wanted to include the deck of many things, so when a player wanted their character to be a big gambler, I took the opportunity. However, I wanted to keep the deck specifically raw. The player I gave the deck to, let's call them L, pulled 2 cards, neither of which were too bad. After that, one of the other party members, let's call them D, wanted to pull a card. D pulled the Skull card, and they used 2 turns trying to use Hideous Laughter during the combat. The Avatar of Death passed both saving throws, obviously nobody intervened, D's character ended up dying, and we stopped the session after a burial. After the session, D and I were talking about their new character, and they said that I didn't have to kill them off like that. D was right, which is why I'm writing this post, but also told them that I wasn't going to baby them and make it so that their character couldn't die. They then brought up the Water Elemental, which was almost a TPK about halfway through the campaign so far. The only surviving member from that encounter was not D's character. They also said that they had no clue that drawing a card could do that, and that nobody had forced me to kill their character. They also said that I had killed the mood of the session, but I honestly couldn't tell. D then said something along the lines of, "You're really shitty, Leslie," and left the voice chat. Now, I'm under the impression that they aren't going to play in this campaign anymore, or the third one that I have going either. I feel really shitty, but a more experienced DM is a player in the same campaign, and when I asked them if I should have fudged the roles because it felt unfair, they said that's what happens with a deck of many things and that they face the consequences. Again, I feel shitty and 100% sure that I'm the asshole here, but I just wanted to get confirmation. There is then also an edit to this post where it says, because I forgot to mention this, D never outright said that they weren't comfortable with their player dying, and they contributed to the memes after the fact. So now let's deep dive in on this and try and look at it from all different angles, from all the perspectives, and see what can be learnt from this. So at the very beginning, the DM does say that they are quite a new DM, and obviously with that, mistakes will be made. When you're new to DMing, you're still trying to understand the game, you're trying to understand your players and whatnot. So, but at least they're brave enough to take up the mantle of being a DM, because a lot of people are too scared to jump in on being a DM. So good for them, that they're actually trying to be a DM. So let's get more into this. So they wanted to include a deck of many things. Let's face it, you hear about the deck of many things that a lot of people go, oh, I want to throw that into my campaign. Understandable, it's a very fun item to be able to use with your players, although I will say that most people, when they use a deck of many things, use an edited version, they take what they want and leave what they don't want. For example, if I were to use the deck of many things, I really hate the idea of the card balance. For those of you who don't know, basically balance is the card that when you draw it, it completely swaps your alignment. So if your character is a very good kind of character, then they become evil. If they're lawful, then they become chaotic. And I just think that's a bit bullshit, because if you've got a character that you really enjoy and like the way that you play them, then drawing that card, if you were to draw the card from the deck of many things, means that you've basically got completely reversed the way that you play that character. And as I said, if you've enjoyed playing the character a certain way, it's a bit of a shit card. So I never like to add the card balance, because I think that's a bit of a terrible card to put in there, just because anything that changes the way that a player has to play their character, I think is nonsense and it shouldn't be included, because you're players should be allowed to play their characters however they want. So that's why I really don't like that card. There are other examples as well, but it's just too many to go into in this video. I might just do a whole video on the deck of many things, basically like pointing out what I don't like about it, and then doing a deck that I would do personally, because I think like there's a lot of cards that definitely can be swapped around. There's definitely ones that involve XP that, like, you know, basically like a lot of people use milestone leveling now, so basically taking XP or removing XP isn't really, like, you know, as effective. But anyway, as I said, that would be potentially a whole new video, so potentially check that out in the future. Anyway, let's get back into this. But I can see how people would want to use the deck of many things in their campaign. I mean, let's face it, Critical Role did it, and like, oh, it's hilarious watching the consequences, so I can understand why people want to put it in it. And it's the fact that this person says they wanted to keep the deck raw, like, basically keeping the deck exactly as it is. And as I said, and for so many reasons, as I've already said, that's a bit of a problem. But as they do say, they are a new DM, so maybe they didn't want to switch things up. But anyway, let's continue. So what you can see from the next kind of line of this is that they gave this deck specifically to this character L, because that character basically had said they wanted to be a big gambler, and so they wanted to give him the deck of many things, so they saw it as an opportunity, like, if their character was a bit of a gambler, to throw in something like this, which makes sense. And they pulled some cards and they weren't really that bad. Then it was another player, D, who actually drew the bad card. So obviously it wasn't actually the intended person, but obviously when you throw in something like the deck of many things and you give it to a party, it's not always going to hit the people who you think it's going to hit, because anyone from that can draw. So it's one of those things yet again whereby I understand like the reason why this DM gave it, because the player expressed that character was going to be a bit of a gambler, and obviously this has just been like quite a little bit of a bad consequences which happened for another player, which, like, they were most likely not expecting. But as I said, these things happen. That's why you've got to kind of be careful when giving items like this to a party, because technically you can do an item thinking, oh yeah, this player's going to use that, I don't have to worry about anything, but then obviously it's not always going to go to the player that you think it's going to go to, and that's why it's a little bit of a minefield with this. You do have to be careful with what items you give your players. And then D drew the skull, and for those of you who don't know, let's briefly go over what the skull card does. So basically what you can see here is the skull card summons an avatar of death, a ghostly humanoid skeleton clad in tattered black robes, carrying a spectral scythe, and it appears in the space of the DM's choosing 10 feet from you and attacks you, warning all others that you must win this battle alone. The avatar fights until you die or it drops to 0 HP, whereupon it disappears. If anyone tries to help you, the helper summons its own avatar of death. A creature slain by an avatar of death cannot be restored to life. And that's another reason why, like, yet again, I know they wanted to keep this raw, but it's a little bit of a bullshitty card in that nobody else can help you, because basically if anyone tries to help you, then another avatar of death gets summoned and is trying to kill them and whatnot. So basically you can just wipe an entire party if everyone tries to help. So you basically watch on from the sidelines as your friend is literally battling to the death with death, which is actually like a cool concept. But anyway, like, you can't do anything, so that in itself is a little bit like a but also the fact that a slain creature cannot be restored to life, which I think is a little bit too extreme. If I was doing something along these lines, if I was like homebrewing this, I would have it along the lines of you couldn't bring them back through like the normal standard means, like a resurrection spell or something along those lines. You'd actually have to like do a whole quest line of having to like save their soul from somewhere. If I was doing something like this, I would also potentially do something along the lines of like the avatar of death, when it takes you down to 0 hit points, instead of taking your soul, says that they'll make a deal with you that they will let you live, but basically that you owe Death one, and and Death can claim that at some point, or that you've actually got to do something for Death, and then that opens up like another quest line that you've got to do this specific thing for Death. But as I said, that's just what I would do. But as I said, I know that they wanted to keep the rules as raw. So obviously that explains in the story why nobody wanted to intervene, because obviously the consequences of that basically like the Death Avatar said, nobody else get involved, this is a one-on-one, so that's why nobody intervened. And then obviously the next bit is the DM talking to D, the character, about new character creation, and that's when D brings up the point they didn't have to kill their character like this, which, as I said, there were other alternatives that, maybe they could have been brought back in a different way, rather than, it just being a straightforward resurrection kind of thing. But as I said, they wanted to keep the things as raw. It also says they brought up a previous story of, the water elemental incident, which, apparently was nearly a TPK, but one of the characters managed to survive from that. So I can take it from that potentially, because it doesn't really explain it well enough to know that what happened at that stage, but I take it that all the characters died apart from one character, because it does say there that the only surviving character in that encounter was not Dee's character, implying that one of Dee's previous characters has died, and the other party members in that instance died as well, and only one person survived, and obviously then continued on, found new compatriots, which obviously were the players rejoining as new players, I would assume. So that's kind of alluding to the fact that Dee was probably aware that death was on the cards here, because one of their characters had previously died, or other characters had previously died in this campaign, so I think it's kind of alluding to that. I would say that the wording of the DM saying like, I'm not going to baby you and make it that your character can't die might have been a bit harsh. I mean, they do say that they do agree like that D was right, they didn't have to kill their character off like that. But I said like, then telling them that like, I'm not going to baby you and make it so that your character can't die. I said, maybe the wording there might have not been the best. And obviously, I said, we need to remember is like the whole reason why Dee's kind of lashing out at this moment is because after the session, they're still kind of raw from their character dying, especially if they weren't expecting their character to die. Oh, I'm going to draw a card. Oh no, suddenly I'm dead. So I can understand like that. From that perspective, that player is going to be very frustrated and like quite upset because, you know, like depending on how connected they were to that character, them suddenly dying, like it's obviously going to cause like a little bit of an outburst in you, which obviously they do later on in this. But I said like we'll get there when they get there. But yeah, so maybe not saying that, like I was saying, like look, so you do know that death is a part of this game, you know, like maybe saying it's something along those lines, rather than saying I'm not going to baby you like and make it so your characters can't die. But as I said, it's a new DM. I can understand that maybe they're not 100% getting the wording right of what they're trying to say, but they are right in a manner of speaking of, like I was saying, that look, you know that people can die in this world. It has happened previously, so like, you know, this isn't as much of a surprise if it was the first time your character was dying, kind of thing. So wording it a little bit better, like, you know, like you can see both sides of it. But probably one of the most telling things about this is when D actually says like they had no clue that drawing a card could do that. So obviously D had no idea what the deck of many things was, and sometimes you get new players who have no idea what the hell the deck of many things is, even though it's quite an established thing to us veterans who've like played the game for quite a while and know exactly what it is, because I know that our DM tried to introduce a deck of many things at some point, but none of our characters touched it because we kind of knew what it could cause, and we were like, yeah, no, we're leaving that be. But obviously that was a bit meta, and admittedly maybe our characters should have drawn a card just to see what would happen, but that's besides the point. With new players who've got no idea, like if they honestly didn't know that drawing a card like could cause such things, like maybe one of the NPCs should have said something like who was giving them the deck, or maybe like they got it inspected at a magic shop, and like basically there should have been something in there which let them know that this deck, while having some potential chances for like wondrous things to happen, also can have dire consequences that like potentially could lead to somebody's death, or something, like saying something like that, actually giving the players like who don't know like the gravitas of knowing what the deck can do, like, you know, so actually not giving that at all. Like, you know, I can yet again understand, like I just thinking, oh, I'm just drawing a card, not expecting death happens. Like I can see it from that point of view. And then obviously D gets very emotional. It's like you're very shitty, and basically leaves the voice chat, which, as I said, you need to understand that they're very emotional at that point. It's quite raw that they've just lost their character, and like, you know, emotions are running high. So I can't really blame them for that. Obviously, like, you know, it's not the best way to go about it, but I can understand the mind frame of which that player was in at the time. And yet again, I can understand why the DM feels quite shitty themselves, because as they say later on, like that they're feeling very shitty and they 100% think that they're the arsehole here, whereas I don't think that they are 100% the arsehole here. As they already stated, they are quite a new DM, so knowing how to introduce items like this, obviously they're not 100% on, but you learn through failure, and I bet that this DM has learned from this and will try to take this, if they were to do this in the future, like take a slightly different step. Potentially, they might not, who knows, but it's a learning curve, like for any new DM, that these things can happen. But I think most of the time, whenever somebody asks am I the arsehole here, I don't always think that they are 100% an arsehole, because if they were an arsehole, they wouldn't be asking the question to see whether or not they're an arsehole, because genuine arseholes don't care about the opinion that other people have on them. So that's why, like, actually trying to seek redemption, like, you know, and that's why I kind of like reading these things every now and again, like to see other people's points of view. It does say that they have the impression that this player is potentially not going to come back to this campaign or to another campaign that they've got planned, and I feel like this DM should, like, you know, reach out to that player again. If it was a player that they enjoyed playing with up until this point, like, you know, give them a little bit of time to grieve over their character dying, and then try and contact them again and be like, look, sorry that things went down the way that they did, but like, you know, if we could talk this out, I'm hoping that maybe I can get you back in on this other campaign that we're planning, or potentially getting you back in, like, you know, like, because let's face it, sometimes it's really hard to find players that we really gel with and whatnot. So if there was actually no problem with this player up until this point, and they actually enjoyed playing with them, I feel like, you know, maybe they could come to some kind of arrangement if they talked again. But as I said, that's just what I would have probably done. I would have tried to reach out to this player again after a little bit of time had gone past, so give them sufficient time to grieve. But talking and communicating is generally the way to get around most of these problems. There is a bit in there as well where it says that there's a more experienced DM who they asked about it, whether or not they should have fudged the roles, which admittedly, fudging the roles wouldn't have really mattered. Because I mean, they could have let Hideous Laughter go through, but Hideous Laughter would have only basically incapacitated Death for a little bit, and every single time you were doing damage, it would be making saves as well as at the end of its turn, so it would have potentially got out of it. So depending on how much damage the player could have done, bearing in mind that it does say they tried to use Hideous Laughter twice, which it turns they could have used trying to actually hit the thing. It depends on how much health Death had and whether or not that would have really made a difference, because there would have been a lot of saves going on every single turn and every time it took damage, because they could have done it to try and run away, but you can't really run away from Death, because the actual thing is basically that it keeps on going until either it dies or you die. So it might have stalled it for a little bit, but I don't actually know whether or not that would have changed the outcome of the fight in general. But anyway, it's the fact that the experienced DM just says that's what happens with a deck of many things and they face the consequences. It's not exactly 100% what a experienced DM probably should have said. They maybe a little bit more empathy for the player and the DM would have been a little bit nice, being oh look, I know that you wanted to do this raw, and so you did the rules as written, and so you haven't really done anything wrong, but you need to understand that the player is going to be feeling bad because obviously their character has died. A little bit more humanity from an experienced DM, other than that's the deck of many things. These things happen. You face the consequences. You're dead. You're done. It's over. So maybe not the best advice there, but some DMs can be a little bit like that, sadly. But as I said, that's just a whole different topic. Basically, in conclusion, I don't really think that the DM was an arsehole here. They were trying to do the rules as written. Sadly, things got a little bit out of hand, more than they probably wanted them to, and it resulted in a different character getting the worst consequences kind of thing to what they had initially intended, because obviously they gave this to L expecting them to be the ones who's drawing it, because they're a bit of a gambler, and sadly it's ended up on a character they weren't expecting, and things just got a little bit out of hand. So I don't really think that they're in the wrong here. So they are a new DM as well, so obviously they wanted to do the rules as written. I think when they were talking to D after the session, they could have chosen their words a little bit more carefully. And as I said, if they actually like playing with that character, potentially try and reaching out to them afterwards, to check in on them and see whether or not they want to rejoin a campaign is probably the wisest choice. But they need to understand that obviously D was grieving at the time and they were very emotional. They could have been very connected to that character, and obviously they weren't expecting them to die like that. And so, which admittedly, being killed by the Avatar of Death is actually still quite a cool way to go down, in terms of how your character dies. But anyway, obviously from the point of view of the player D, they're very emotional that their character has died, and obviously they've lashed out like this. I feel yet again, once they've called off, maybe then they should have reached out to the DM to be oh look, I'm sorry, look, I just got a little bit too overwhelmed, I wasn't expecting my character to die, and I might have lashed out at you a little bit. But it can be hard for that person to kind of come forward afterwards to be look, okay, right, I might have overreacted kind of thing, especially if they are still feeling a little bit hurt. So yeah, again, I can see it from those point of views as well. I will say that the other player, who is actually an experienced DM, their advice and what they said, maybe that wasn't the best person to go to. They were quite harsh with their advice. I do think that they could have been a little bit more empathetic. Obviously, different players, different situations and whatnot, but
obviously that's just my opinion. I would love to hear what your thoughts are down in the comment section down below. So please, if you've got any thoughts or any differing kind of things that you think should have been done in this situation, I would love to hear them down in the comment section down below, as well as the fact that if any of you have a story of where you thought that you've been the arsehole in a previous campaign, being either the DM or as a character, I would love to hear that down in the comment section down below, because potentially I might make a video of it and we might be able to learn something together from the situation. I'd love to do that. And speaking of which, in community and such like that, speaking of that, there is also the Discord channel if you want to join that, because I plan on building a lovely community where we can talk about all things Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop RPGs and such. And if you like this video in any way, I know it's a bit different from the videos I've been doing on Dungeons and Dragons and a tabletop role-playing game. So yeah, again, I'd love to hear if you like this kind of format. If not, that's absolutely fine as well. But as I said, if you enjoyed yourself, why not consider hitting that subscribe button, hitting the bell and doing all the YouTube algorithm things to help me out. Do not feel forced though, those are your options. Also, if you want to help the channel out and are maybe thinking about getting like a Dungeons and Dragons themed Christmas present for one of your players or DM, then why not check out the Etsy store of Gaming Treasure Chest, where there's a loads of different like dice rollers, dice holders and such, all D&D themed. You can check out link down below. I have designed all these things myself and I will 3D print them and send them to you, the people. But anyway, thank you for the terrible Bane impression. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed your time here. Until next time, goodbye.